I want to welcome you to the presentation and thank you for joining us this morning. This presentation is brought to you by OSSI's Office of Multilingual Education and English Learner Support. My name is Anika Harris. I am the Professional Development Specialist at OSSI, focusing on English language acquisition. And I'm joined by Jennifer Norton. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Jennifer Norton, Manager of English Learner Support, and so glad that you're all here today.
There is a third member of our team, Santiago Sanchez, who's featured in the picture that you see. He's our multilingual specialist, and we will make our contact information available to you at the end of the presentation. Feel free to reach out to any of us. We're going to do a short exercise where you utilize some of the features of this webinar platform. And in this exercise, we will be using the chat box. Let us know, as you see the prompt on the screen, what your name is, what school or LEA you are coming from, and what your role is. Type that into the chat box and we'll get to know you a little bit better.
Good morning, everyone. So great to see familiar names and faces and new ones as well. I see we have Capital Cities, Washington Global, Rocket Ship, PMA, Inspired Teaching, Tubman. Great to see so many different schools represented.
Yes, it is, and hopefully you are indoors getting a cool breeze. We're all in the same boat with the weather this morning and expect it to get hotter. So let's cool off by focusing on what it is we aim to do this school year, in particular how we will focus on the needs of English learners. There is another exercise here for you. We will be using a digital resource called Poll Everywhere. Some of you may have used Poll Ev before. In this exercise, we're going to activate the poll so that you are able to share with us how long you've been an ELPOC, whether your official title is EL Coordinator, EL Department Chair. How long have you been in the role where you are responsible for the needs of English learners? And you have some choices. A, 0 to 1 year, B, 2 to 4 years, C, 5 to 10 years, or D, 11 plus years. If I'm not mistaken, Jennifer, you will be able to activate that poll. And if not, I can support.
Oh, no, I don't think I have the activation.
See if I can support you in participating here.
Oh, I see.
Yep, right along the upper right-hand corner of the screen. There may be a way.
You know what? I don't think that, I think this one maybe we'll do in the chat box.
Sure. That works. All right, so we know you have fluency in chatting through the chat box. You can go ahead and type your letter selection, A, B, C, or D, and that will help us see how much experience we have in the room. And for those who are less experienced, you should be able, through some of our activities, to learn from each other and get some ideas to get you up and running this school year. It looks like we've got a good mix. Good mix in the crowd today. All right, thank you for introducing yourselves and letting us know how long you've been in this role. We'll get right into the heart of our topic today, which is getting you started for the start of the 2020-21 school year.
Yes, so this series is part of a larger start of school initiative, and we'll just give you a brief overview of the other offerings that are happening at OSCE. You can go to the next slide, Anita. So this slide shows the 5 priorities that OSCE is focusing on this summer. And I encourage you to go to the Start of School webpage that is here so that you can see the range of resources that are available. And many of these are role-based and cover a wide range of topics. Under early access to student data, that is where you will find checklists related to serving English learners. And we will also cover information related to what's in those checklists throughout this the series that we're offering as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this calendar shows just all of the range of trainings that are offered. This is the first in our 4-part series, so you'll see it, that we have for the next several weeks sessions here specifically towards English learner coordinators. And you can also check out all the other events and share this information with others at your school as well. I would like to make a special point of pointing out Kid Talk, which is an event that is being expanded a bit this year. This is an extension of the Bridge to High School Data Exchange program in which middle school and high school staff come together to discuss the academic and social emotional needs of incoming 9th graders. This is a special data sharing and special event that's very much geared towards supporting students in that transition to high school, which we know is ever more critical this year because of our special circumstances. And to leverage this event even more, OSCE would like to extend the invitation specifically to counselors, special education coordinators, English learner coordinators, student support staff, and school leaders. So I encourage you to contact Renee Eason. We'll make all of these slides available to you as well if you are interested in participating in that event on August 13th. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is first in a 4-part series. I do want to say, like, we're gearing this towards English learner coordinators at the school or LEA level, but this is also super valuable for EL teachers and really anyone who serves English learners. But we have designed this to be interactive, to allow you the time and forum to share what your efforts are and also what your questions are. So throughout these 4 sessions, we hope that it's going to provide you an opportunity to share and also leave with actions that can help you get off to a great start with the school year. And for this session, we're focusing on giving you an opportunity to focus on preparing staff to recognize and value English learners' unique experiences, strengths, and needs in the context that we're facing now within COVID-19. So we hope that as you go through these learning activities that it's useful for you in thinking about how you can support students directly, and also how you can use these to work with teachers to then help influence their ability to understand students who are English learners, where they are coming from, and how to truly value and support them as we start off the school year. Okay, so you know, we're starting off our norms here, which of course we would do in person as well, and also with, you know, special considerations for the virtual forum. We are so glad that you're taking the time today. We recognize your time is really valuable. We hope you can, you know, just stay with us, stay engaged. Please do share your questions, share your truths, and, you know, as we work together, you know, let's assume positive intent as others share and really listen and support one another. We're all in this together, and, you know, if you joined a little earlier, you could hear Anika and I collaborating as we navigate our use of WebEx, which is a little bit new to us. So, you know, we appreciate your support, and we're here to support you as well. We'll be using chats and polls along the way. Generally speaking, please do keep your mic on mute just to keep sound reverberations down. And if you are speaking, then you can unmute yourself. Okay. So we know this is a bit of a special summer, and I hope everyone is kind of finding a way to kind of make the best of our situation. And we'd love to hear from you. Already July, very hot, but what has been a highlight of your summer so far? Please share a message into the chat box. And we'd love to hear from you about where you are and what's. Okay, great. I'm seeing some notes that maybe others are not seeing the messages from others. We'll call out and share out, and then we'll try to fix that, okay? All right, so I'm seeing some great notes about having time to read, visiting family, resetting habits, spending time with daughter, family, getting engaged, congratulations. Oh, so wonderful to see all the great notes, growing my garden, enjoying the sunshine, updating the backyard. Collaboration, practicing piano, technology, beach trip. This is great. Wonderful. Well, it is great to see that everyone is taking the time and having a chance to do that self-care and to, you know, take that time that you need, and as we also try to gear up for the next school year. Okay. Just a quick note, you can see that we have framed the 4 sessions around these 4 foundational principles. We're going to focus each session on one of these principles, and just, you know, our approach is that these apply whether we're teaching in person and whether we're doing any kind of distance learning. And so what we're trying to do is to provide a space for us to problem solve, share ideas and solutions to make these come alive regardless of the mode of instruction, and to try to present adaptations on how we can make these work in any circumstance. Okay, now I think I need to take a second here. I need to get this all started. I'm not sure, Anika, if I can start this poll since I don't have the the PowerPoint. Okay, everybody, just for the sake of time, as we're kind of figuring out our poll situation, if you would not mind adding to the chat box or unmuting yourself to share, are you tasked with providing EL-related PD at your school? And if so, what are your plans? If you're not, but you want to do PD, tell us the PD you would facilitate. Just take this pause here and some technical. Okay, yep, we're seeing that it looks like you cannot send a chat to everyone. It's only coming to us. Okay, well, we are going to try to work on that for a minute here. Okay, thanks everybody for letting us know about this glitch. See if we can find any kind of ground. And I apologize. I'm not sure that I can fix this at this very moment. Maybe what we can do is just ask if you would like to share out. Please unmute yourself or do a hand raise and I will unmute you. And we'd love to hear any kind of PD that you might be planning or something that you feel is needed and would like to do. Okay, great. I'm seeing sharing how we as a staff can engage our English learners, best practices when serving English learners during distance learning. Okay, I see Speak2 will be hosting PDs at least twice a month to best support teachers working with English learners, especially during virtual learning. I see Ellie is using Iris Center online module as a baseline and then 2 other virtual sessions. Great, so leveraging existing offerings. And, oh,
I'll just chime in from AP Wilkinson. It's great to have you with us today. Looks like you are working on scaffolding, the scaffolding cycle at your school so that it can be adapted for this hybrid learning experience that we have and ensuring that students feel a sense of belonging, which is super important. Not only because we know that, but research has also dictated that sentiment needs to be conveyed to students.
Great, well, let's keep going. And I'd just like to share the guiding questions that we have for this session today. So just as you go through this session, these are the things that we're thinking about that we would hope to put out for you all to think about as well. How are we working with our English learner students to meet them where they are and integrate the resources they have access to? What assumptions are we making that prevents us from fully understanding our EL students? be actively listening to our EL students about their experience during the COVID-19 pandemic. So these are our mantras, and we hope to just bring that to life as we go through this session today. And as I mentioned, we're focusing on the first foundational principle of valuing, basically just valuing our students for who they are and all that they bring. And we've, tried to frame this specifically for English learners and focusing on cultural and linguistic background. And this goes for all students. And we, feel that students all come with the assets of language, of families, culture, and community. And we are, want to put out there to see our students through that assets-based lens and to have that come through in the educational program that they're participating in. And for us, this also includes drawing on their entire linguistic repertoire, which includes languages in addition to English.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to take over at this point. Sometimes it feels like we're trying to do, mission control communication. I think I've been watching too much Nest. Just to let you know, the session tab at the top of our dashboard does say that folks should have the ability to connect through chat with each other and with us. So I think a little more exploration is needed, and for those of you participating, we are live and real time. We'll just adapt as needed if some glitches do occur. Right, so we will be talking about several influences on the social emotional wellness of our English learner students. We understand that the social emotional wellness of ELs can be influenced by their unique cultural factors, linguistic factors, and the context that they're living in. So those together may make their wellness needs a little bit distinct from other populations of students, and we'll dig into what exactly those needs and sub-influences are. Just as a couple of reminders, as likely many of you know, English learners are not homogeneous, you can't lump them all together. They're coming from different backgrounds. They've had diverse experiences, and their experiences during this pandemic have varied as well. We know that their economic situation, their language, their cultural background are varying from one student to the next. So we'll bear this in mind as we go through the presentation and as we start planning for the school year. Another reminder is that not all English learners are undocumented. We know very well in the United States, including the District of Columbia, that many English learners are born here and may in fact be born here with residency and have papers, quote unquote. But it's not okay and it's not legal to ask students or their families about their citizenship status. So as you're thinking about enrollment procedures or trying to find out more about students and their families and their backgrounds, there are some parameters that you need to be aware of when it comes to questioning and digging a little deeper. Back to influences, let's bring this local and think about the wards in DC. Certain wards in our city enroll more English learners than others and have been more affected by the COVID-19 situation. Within our city's immigrant community, we know that they're trying to navigate this global pandemic in a language sometimes and in a culture which may be new. Within their navigation, there may be some vulnerability because of things that they don't know or they want to express themselves and can't. But they also bring their own strength, having maybe different backgrounds from other students and other adults. That leads to resilience and will help them get through the pandemic and also reach their academic and language goals. So while we know there are some vulnerable spots, we should also bear in mind that there are some strengths that our students or English learners bring to the school experience. To speak more about diversity during this pandemic, also want to be thinking about how they will respond when they get into the classroom. Some students may be eager to share what's been going on, and some may not want to share and be more reluctant to dive into discussions that are happening in the classroom. Do know that the psychological and safety needs of students and their families may have to take priority over academics. And again, we do see in the news, in research, that social emotional wellness may need to be a focus in school, in the school setting. And if there's anyone who is unmuted, if you would kindly mute yourself, and then we won't hear extraneous background noises. I'd appreciate that. So to carry us through bringing social emotional support and social emotional wellness to the school setting, we thought through some training tools that are available for you. Just want to make sure there were no slides missed.
I still hear someone typing, I think. If someone is not muted, can you mute yourself? Thank you.
One training tool is to use music to support self-care. Music is one way that we can feel and express what we can't say in words as we're listening, and if we have musical sensibility ourselves, we can also use art form to convey what we're feeling. You know, sometimes, again, we can't say what's going on in our hearts and minds in words. So an idea for you when you return to your educational setting is to perhaps lead staff or students in a musical self-care journey. And I'm going to break this journey into 3 parts and encourage you to use this at your schools or modify the experience at your schools. You may be tasked with leading PD for staff, but you might also think that this would be a great tool to use in the classroom to address social emotional wellness. The first part is to define for either your staff or students what self-care is, and then share one of your practices. So you make it personal, and as you have opened yourself up, then ask your participants what self-care practices they have or that they do. They'll be able to use the definition that you provided to help them think through that and then share out. Step 2 is to select musical clips. You know, there's different types of music. There's upbeat music. There's music that's more for contemplation or drawing out feelings. You sort of have to go into the experience knowing what outcome you want to get or what you want to produce in your participants. So select carefully. Step 2 is to have participants either watch or listen to a musical clip that you've selected. And then part 3 is to lead a discussion. And there are some guiding questions that appear on the screen under themes. How did the music make you feel? Did you see something if you were watching the musical clip that was interesting? And in our case, today, I will be leading you through this very exercise And I'll have you think through what it takes to perform together from home. We will be listening to Edward Elgar Nimrod from his Enigma Variations. He's a composer coming out of England. You will be listening to the program notes and then a snippet of the piece to think about how the story of Nimrod is relevant to our situation today with us being at home and trying to unify to put something together. Note for English learners who are developing writing skills, these questions also make for great journal entries. And one idea is to post the questions, play the musical clip, and then have students journal so that they're writing first and then sharing out. Students can use their written piece to inform how they speak out when it's time to speak. So I'm going to lead you through the 3 parts of this exercise, and let's just call this activity Music to Support Social Emotional Wellness of English Learners. With the first part, I provided you on the screen a definition of self-care. This is a process where you have an awareness of what you need to do in times of difficulty or uncertainty to take care of yourself and feel okay. With students, they may not necessarily be aware, or maybe they've never been asked and have practices, but because they haven't been asked, aren't really aware that they have these tools for themselves. A tip is not to dictate what practices to do or when to do them or how, but let students experience these for themselves. With older, with adults, you also don't need the dictation, but we usually have some of these skills already for us. I'm going to share one of my self-care practices, so I'm going to make this personal. As you see the little pictures on the screen, I moved into a house a year ago. I had a rough basement. Part of the floor was unfinished, and I was determined to tile it. And now I don't have time, but I make time for tiling, and it makes me feel better. In fact, I haven't completed the tiling because it's so enjoyable. I want to make sure I have more to do as we continue to stay at home. I also rely heavily on aromatherapy. If it doesn't smell good, I will make it smell good, and that sends me off to a place of tranquility. So those are my self-care practices. I invite you to share in the chat box what self-practices or self-care practices you do. Through your sharing, maybe we'll learn something new that we want to pick up or adopt or explore for ourselves. All right, gym time, that's great. Meditation, journaling. On the last slide, we talked about using the journal with students to support their speaking, but it also is a time for them to reflect and work through feelings. So I'm glad that that was mentioned. Someone very lucky and has a Peloton. Yes, the biking and riding, I'm there with you, so I have a connection with those of you who are doing that, and getting away from some screen time. Not necessarily a pipe dream, but if we can take some small breaks here and there are benefits. So thank you for sharing. Let's get into the second part of this activity, which is the musical selection itself. I came across musical selection as we were putting these slides together, and it's more of a reflective piece, so it's not the energizing type of music. In this case, it may stir some emotions, as you see the heads up at the bottom of the screen. Some people may experience a release. In the case of adults and youth, that's absolutely okay. And it's even better if they have a space to talk about how they feel or how the music made them feel. This clip comes from the Washington, D.C. Youth Orchestra program, so I've chosen something local. The conductor, Kenneth Whitley, will provide background information, the program notes, about the piece. And you'll hear a little bit about the composer and how he came to put the Nimrod piece together. That will inform the question, what did it take, or how is this relevant? How is this piece relevant to what we're experiencing today? Then you'll see the musicians in the Senior Youth Orchestra play. You may choose to focus on the scenery. You may focus on the music itself or close your eyes to listen. You may be interested in looking at the musicians. All of those approaches to experiencing the sound are okay. And yes, Lucia, I can see what you're typing. Thank you. My question for participants is, if you have a multimedia viewer under your chat and question boxes, and if so, you should see a clip from YouTube that's queued up for you called Together at Home DCYOP Spring 2020. I will be playing that clip for you just a few minutes. We won't get to the end of the musical selection in the interest of time. If at any point you cannot hear the media, let me know, or if you cannot see the media clip, let me know and we'll adjust accordingly. Here we go.
They will present Nimrod from Edward Alpha Enigma variation. Enigma variations were very important. Each variation refers to a person in Belgar's life. Nimrod dedicated both friends affected to at a time when Elgar was considering walking away from the old composition. Yeager encouraged him. Right? And Yeager reminded him that Beethoven had also struggled with his career and with his this conversation helped to Elgar invited
Yep, I see some comments coming in. Trying to see if there is a solve. I think people can hear the clip but not see it. And if you don't mind, participants, you will have the links to the clip queued up to this, made available for you if you want to replicate the experience. But frankly, we're here to reflect on music. If you wouldn't mind listening to the music, and listening to the conductor speak about Elgar, then we'll go ahead with the selection. All right, so had there been a little bit sound quality or the ability for you to see that clip, as we had expected and planned, we could have listened to it just a little bit more. Please accept our apologies for the media not working as expected. Again, we can make the links available, queued up to the minute and second if you would like to listen. See some local youth doing something pretty incredible, or if you would like to replicate this experience in your practice, again, we'll make that available for you. All right, so to round out the experience, as a facilitator of this training or social emotional wellness activity, you would ask the questions that you see. And for both educators and students alike, that third question, what do you think it takes to perform together from home like that? Might yield a really interesting discussion. What you may not have seen is individual tiles or video clips of the orchestral musicians in their homes playing and making this unified, very professional sound. And then think to yourself as an educator, is there anything that I can apply in my education of students to the new learning environment that I'm finding myself in to get students off to a great school year? And you can also ask the same of students. Is there anything you noticed from the work that the orchestra did and apply that to this new learning environment and make ourselves successful in our endeavors? Once you get the link to the clip, you will better be able to hear the background story of this composition, which does, as a matter of fact, relate to our lives as educators. And students can also reflect on, even in the distant past, when there were situations that were difficult, people were able to overcome and produce something beautiful, keep their community going, and the benefits have lasted into the modern day. As a writing extension, the questions, again, would allow students to activate the writing domain, or allow students, as I mentioned, the time and space to reflect on their feelings. So we can see your chats and questions coming through. If you would engage us by just sharing a response to one of the questions that you see on the screen. You can put it into either the chat or the question box. You can see both. How did the music make you feel? If you heard it. And if you weren't able to hear it, what do you think it might take for musicians, say, who are all in their individual homes to put a unified composition together and perform it through video? What does it take, and how can you apply that reflection to the upcoming school year? Yeah, I'm glad to know at a certain point you were able to hear. That music is quite powerful. I'm also a little biased. I'm a product of the very old version of the DC Youth Orchestra program. It was very rough, practicing in -8-degree weather with no heat under Mr. Whitley at the time. And here we are again with Mr. Whitley, and the students are unified and making something powerful happen. I see, Howard, you use the term content expert to pull this off, to help students pull this off, right? Collaboration is a recurring theme, and intense planning, absolutely. And thank you, Rachel, for sharing your comment here about students working together towards a shared goal and shared sense of purpose. We as educators have to set that up and be very intentional in speaking to students about what the end goal is and the experience that we're sharing, for them to realize that that is the purpose. Sometimes if you don't say it explicitly, that piece gets lost. All right, so thank you for participating through chat, through the question box, and bearing through some of the technical snafus that we have had. I'm going to move along. You've already responded a little bit about what you thought of the exercise. Just one last question. There are 3 bullet points that you'll see at the bottom of the screen. When might you use an activity like this with staff or students? be interested to see your responses. How useful was this for you? What purpose would you use it for, and what type of music might you choose if you decide to do this activity? How can you tweak the activity to make it more accessible for your English learners who are still developing listening skills, speaking, reading, and writing skills? The background story. Thank you for sharing, Dolores, the background story, maybe with some additional visuals of the life and times, or who was Nimrod. But the background story applies no matter what piece you pick. And I like the idea that was shared about having circle time, where there's more of a reflective space for meditation or mindfulness before class or the lesson. And indeed, students are going to be in a hyper vulnerable state because of the pandemic, and because we're continuing with distance learning or some hybrid form of learning. And the relationship building, letting them get to know you, which is why personalizing self-care, as we did before finding out what students are interested in. Personalizing some other activities that we'll do a little bit later in the presentation are very important to help build trust and relationships and just getting to know your students. And as Erin said, letting students know they're in a safe space. So we'll look at some more influences on the social emotional well-being of English learners. We've already talked about how they've had diverse experiences during the pandemic with the families of our students. Some may have strong extended family networks and community networks, and others may not. For families who are undocumented or maybe don't have citizenship, but have other types of residency statuses, they may be looking at the news, hearing the news, and be concerned about removal from the country, and how they're going to get access to resources or services because of either being undocumented or because of profiling, having an ethnic name or an ethnic look. So that sentiment is especially heightened right now. There are some tools that we wanted to point out to you that are relevant to these influences that we're covering in the presentation. One training is titled English Learners in the Law. You will get a copy of these slides, and the hyperlinks will be active for you, so you will be able to click on the link and watch this webinar. It is treatment of English learners and civil rights, and the discussion is on the history of how some of the early 20th century civil rights cases came to affect how we program and instruct English learners today. There's also a presentation on keeping our local schools safe for families and students, so that you as educators and administrators know about the rights that students and families have in DC schools, along with a U.S. Education Department fact sheet. It's colorful. It can be posted up on the wall. It's a Safe Spaces fact sheet for families and school staff, again, outlining what their rights are and what is not lawful actions that cannot take place on the school grounds. We know with some English learners who have ties to a country outside of the United States that at this time they may not have been able to visit family or friends in their home country. And the purpose that they would have gone home may have been to grieve or support an ailing family member. So social distancing might be a reason why students and their families might not be able to visit families that are here. And within reasonable access, you don't have to get on a plane necessarily to visit them, but because of social distancing, we've been kept apart. And that can be hard, particularly for younger students, as it has been for all of us. There are students who may have lost a family member due to the virus or have feared that a family member, what is the outcome going to be if they're battling COVID-19 or another illnesses? And what it looks like to grieve or be afraid varies from person to person, but it also varies across cultures. And with families who are not conversant in English or may not be able to read and comprehend text, getting information about resources, including school resources, can be very challenging. Maybe the family can read and does have access to technology, but the information wasn't made available in a language that they can understand. So let us be mindful of our families' needs and how we can get information to them that will make the difference in their students' success and having great outcomes this school year. As with so many who are not English learners, the family members of English learners may have found themselves unemployed and really having a hard time just putting food on the table or getting income to meet very basic needs, and that in itself is traumatic. With our older students, they may be finding themselves working to provide additional income for their family, where income may have fallen short because of this pandemic. And the issue of healthcare is always an issue, a significant one for English learners who may not have already had proper access to healthcare services pre-COVID-19 and are now having a hard time navigating resources for healthcare, or again, fear profiling, think that maybe their status, residency status would be a barrier to getting those services and may not be getting the health care that they need to stay well. Another influence is how we live, where we rest our head. The living arrangements may have changed in the past few months, where a student finds himself or herself in a different living space or even with different people. I was just reading an article which speaks to the last point here, that the student may find themselves the primary caregiver, where parents are not available either because of working or because of illness. And as you get to know your students, as we encourage you to do at the beginning of the year, and you get to know the families of English learners, if you find out that a student or a family is struggling to get their basic needs met, there are some tools that are hyperlinked here on the slide just to get started. And when you get the slides, we certainly encourage you to take a look at the links and see what is available and have those resources on the ready in case families or students indicate that they need that assistance. What has come to light more recently during the pandemic is that we're going through growing pains as a country with respect to civil rights. And a month or so ago, there was a lot in the news about tension between police and communities of color. And for our English learner students, they may be extending that tension to, well, I'm an English learner, or I have an accent. When I speak, I have an ethnic sounding name or look to me. I wonder if I'm going to be a target with law enforcement agencies. So that may be a new concern for students, and wanted to make sure that we didn't leave that out of the mix. That's a lot to go through when we're in the middle of a pandemic. So the question here is, do you have the background knowledge to lead a presentation about Yale and immigrant civil rights pioneers? And are you able to share those pioneer stories, which are so inspirational, with your students or even with your staff? We've got some tools for you. There's a PBS video that was put together a while ago on a seminal case that led to desegregation from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast in the earlier part of the 20th century. Their video is Mendes versus Westminister. It's an 8-minute piece, and it lets you get to know the stories behind the everyday real people who felt there was an injustice being put upon them and got their day in court, and the resulting court case influences how we allow students to be a part of our public education system to this day. The Castanera family interview comes from the Castanera versus Pickard case out of Texas in the 70s. In that interview, you're able to see dad, mom, one of the sisters, and their attorney. And they talk about what it was like to be Mexican American in Texas, but not have access to great education, and how they tried to overcome that. There's also a link here about speaking up against racism around the new coronavirus, and we, as many other institutions, are encouraging young and old alike not to stigmatize certain groups of people as being carriers or of the virus, or the cause of the virus. But that's absolutely not okay. I hope that we have the Castanera v. Pickard clip queued up for you. If we can listen to a couple minutes of that clip, you'll be able to hear what was going on in the 70s in Texas. Let's see if we've got some multimedia going for you today.
Anika, would you like me to just put that in the chat box, or do you want me to play it for the multimedia?
Chat box, okay. And I'll just give a brief synopsis. So again, with the Castanera v. Pickard, we're talking about the early 1970s. We've got just a regular family in Texas trying to send their kids to school, and the parents find that their kids' education isn't all that it was promised to be on paper. And the family hired an attorney who, in his youth, wasn't really sympathetic to Mexicans, Mexican Americans. Lo and behold, as an adult practicing law, he took their case, and Castanera v. Pickard went all the way to the Supreme Court and changed the way we look at instruction and what are the requirements for sound instruction for English learners. It's really interesting to see this family with their attorney talk about what the life and times were back in the 70s, but it's also very really good tool to think about, one, how everyday folks can make change, and two, what we need to do in our instructional practices to meet the requirements that came out of this court case. So in the chat box, you should see a link for yourself that you can save and be able to access that video when needed. All right, so one training opportunity we provided for you today was the music activity. I'd like to close out our morning together with another training activity that can be shared with staff and students alike. And I came up with the title. It's called All Win. All in, all win. We are all in our current situation together, even though we've got different backgrounds and experiences that we're bringing to the pandemic. We're all in the pandemic together. We are around the world experiencing sort of a change in how we think about law enforcement and perhaps justice reform. If we stick together, we'll all win. And there are many different images that you see here on this slide. I'm going to personalize it again because this is another experience where staff or students may feel a little vulnerable, and it can be helpful to put yourself out there first. So I'm going to put myself out there with an experience that was painful at the time, but has a very beautiful ending. I'm taking you back to 1995. I was a student living in Ecuador after having lived in the neighboring country of Peru, just to the south of Ecuador. Haven't had a great time, but could not get a visa to stay in Peru because of civil war situation going on there. So I moved myself to Ecuador and found it a very different country than Peru to the south. You see the sort of a row of volcanoes in one of the central images there. I found myself disenchanted with Ecuador. One, it was just different from Peru. Two, I was not expecting to see so much racism. It was not directed at me, but was very clearly 24/7 directed towards, in the capital at least, towards the indigenous community. And I was very upset. I had a candy store across from my school, and you know, went at it with bulks of Skittles. So you see the Skittles there. I think that may have caused my tooth problems to this day, eating so many Skittles day in, day out. What was self-care for me? I didn't know that this was self-care. I just knew that I needed a break from going to school in the capital and seeing all of the things that were bothering me. So I would get on a bus early on Friday morning, around 5, and take it to one of the neighboring provinces where I would be surrounded by indigenous folks, and there was a small Black community or Afro-Ecuadorian community as well. I'd get on that bus, I'd arrive, I would teach at my teacher's school. It was the best of times, that's all I can say. And then on Sunday, when it was time for me to go back to the capital, I would just sort of have to put a shield up around myself and brace for what I was going to experience in the coming weeks. So it really was a difficult time for me. Fast forward to November 1995, I was sitting in the second home I would live in. It was a duplex in the capital, and I was on the sofa with friends, Ecuadorian friends. They told me that the Miss Ecuador contest was on, so we watched on the small old TV, you know, the kind with the antenna, and interestingly, I was supposed to be a contestant and then bowed out because that's not really my thing. Well, the winner was Monica Shala, and she was the first Afro-Ecuadorian to be crowned Miss Ecuador ever, but not the last. And that was just a shock. I mean, there was silence, just a large silence throughout the country. It was a big shock. Also in November, when I went to the neighboring province on the weekend to teach, I was with my teachers and students and students' parents. At the end of class, there was a naming ceremony for one of the students' baby sisters. They named her Ninarina Pacarina. My teacher did the naming ceremony, and the name means the fire that comes back again over and over at dawn. You see a statue of Ruminyawi, who that was my student's name. His sister is Ninarina Pacarina. Ruminyawi was the name of later emperor of the Incan Empire. And all of this comes together if you hold fast to some of this information. Also in November, I visited a place called Baños to experience the hot springs and thermal baths. And during my stay, there were other people, Ecuadorians, on their pilgrimage to Baños, and they wept seeing me, a person of color, who, as they found out, I had gone to school and I was still going to school. They were told that as people of color, indigenous and black, they couldn't go to school because they were just too dumb. And I was shocked, but they said to me, you know, you're our hope that maybe in the future our children or our grandchildren will have a chance to go to school. Ninarina Pacarina and Ruminyawi's family members were starting a revolution, which is called the Pachakutik Revolution, which means time comes around again. And they asked me on one Saturday afternoon, can you tell us a little bit about Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X? Because we're starting an indigenous revolution, and we've narrowed down, we think we've narrowed down who we're going to model our activities after. And we're considering Dr. King and Malcolm X. Can you share a little bit about them? So that was 1995. 1999, I was in Astoria, New York, on a Sunday in January, watching a stream of the Ecuadorian news just to see what was going on in the old country. And I saw the Pachakutik Revolution happening in front of me. I think it was January 21st, 1999. Thousands of indigenous marched to the National Congress, sort of like the White House, and ousted the president and sat in the National Congress holding demonstrations. All of it was peaceful, but time came around again, which is the name of the revolution. Also the name of the baby who was named came into play in that moment in 1999. So there goes my experience with watching different people come together for the same purpose. If we bring this to English learners, we have different cases across time in the 20th century. There are pictures here from some of the seminal court cases that influence what we do with our instruction and programming for English learners today. And we encourage you to share this with staff so that they understand, you know what, we can't underestimate this population of students because look at the potential they have. With students, it would be great to share the all-win activity so that they understand, hey, we can't be underestimated. Look at the potential that we have to make great change in the world. Now, if we bring this to our current day, the Black Lives Matter took the forefront of news for weeks, not that long ago. It's not just African Americans saying Black Lives Matter, as we see from these images, it's voices around the world rising up around a common issue. If we all join together, the thought is maybe law enforcement and the discussions around law enforcement and justice will benefit all. So in doing this activity, you can ask staff or students, have they seen themselves represented in the current civil rights movement? And based on advocacy that English learners performed in the past, what do students think they might be able to get out of the current social justice movement that you see here on the slide? And for staff, if you do this for staff, what does staff think students who are English learners and their families might benefit from this new movement, or how might this movement be impacting them today? So the exercise is to find a connection with civil rights in your life and share that with your participants, and then bring that to the context of English learners and the context of the civil rights movement that we're experiencing today. Be curious to know what you think of this all-win, all-in activity and how you might use it with students or staff. You can go ahead and type into the chat or question box. If you have different images or different storytelling that you would incorporate, please share. There are ideas that we may not have thought of. Great, thank you. Keep it coming. And as Dolores mentions, this population of students may well be our masters. I certainly understand what you're saying there, and that's why I got into education, to make sure I could do my part to equip students so that when I got old, someone would be able to take care of me competently. So the training tools from today, we provided you with articles, multimedia resources that you can use for discussions with staff. There are also music activities and civil rights activities that you can use with students and staff. And some next steps here for you will also be included in a handout where you can sort of check, am I ready to accomplish these areas to support students and their families? And if so, I should feel equipped to get off to a great school year, no matter what form it takes.
And everyone, I put a link in the chat box to where the PowerPoint and the handout are saved. It's linked to all of the videos and tools that Anita is referencing throughout this. So we've provided here another tool that if you were to go here, this will provide you other exercises similar to the one that Anita so just generously led us through just now. And so she kindly provided a live example of how that can look. And there are other similar types of exercises at this point. So we hope that the resources that we have provided today are going to be helpful. And we also hope that you will register for upcoming sessions. And I will say I'm seriously reconsidering WebEx at a point, so if you have already signed up, please do read the emails that you get from us carefully in case there is a change. We want to make sure we have the best experience for everybody. And then Anika's also added here some additional upcoming sessions that we think are especially valuable for focusing on student social emotional wellness as a really foundational part of the Linguistic school year. I also am going to put into the chat, and you'll receive in the follow-up email later today, a link to the a guidance that we have just published yesterday. This is a provisional identification procedure that can maybe used during distance learning if necessary. We will provide the link to the webinar that is going to focus specifically on this, and that is in addition to the 4-part series of this. So I want to make sure we have that, and again, it will be in the email as well.
So that rounds out our presentation for today. We will certainly be here on the webinar platform in case there are questions, comments, maybe some feedback you'd like to share. We can unmute you, or you can continue to use the question and chat boxes. We will be monitoring those. Again, we thank you for participating and being so attentive and engaged in the session. We will send out reminders of some communication around that second presentation. In case the format changes, you'll be apprised of any changes should they occur. Please do reach out to us. We would like to get to know you better and continue to get to know you if you're friends that we've gotten to know over the years already. But again, we'll be here on the line. We, it looks like, have a few minutes remaining for this session. Otherwise, stay cool. Just letting folks know who are interested in providing feedback or curious about how that happens. You should be receiving an email within the day with a link to an OSCE survey where you can share with us your thoughts and feedback on the session.